Chapter 1106. Han Nan's eyes were filled with eagerness. He wanted nothing more than to dig out his heart and offer it to Jing Yunjiao. But seeing Han Nan's stubbornness, Jing Yunjiao felt nothing but disgust. "I've already made my rejection clear. If you dare come any closer, don't blame me for turning on you," Jing Yunjiao threatened. Han Nan was clearly looking for trouble. She'd given him a chance to save face, but he didn't cherish it. If he didn't even care about his own dignity, why should she be considerate of him? Han Nan couldn't take it anymore. Tears welled up in his eyes. He looked extremely pitiful, as if Jing Yunjiao had abandoned him. "Yunjiao, no matter what, I'll persevere. I can prove that I love you more than that old man." Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, Han Nan's entire body was suddenly flung away. He slammed heavily into the front door with a resounding thud. Jing Yunjiao couldn't take it anymore. Although Han Nan was a bit slow last semester, it wasn't to this extent. It was as if he'd become a completely different person. If it weren't for the fact that he still looked somewhat handsome, he would have looked no different from a perverted stalker. Jing Yunjiao's actions gave everyone a fright. They cast sympathetic glances in Han Nan's direction, but no one stepped forward to help. If Han Nan had pursued Jing Yunjiao in the past, they would have thought the two were a good match. After all, Jing Yunjiao was said to be an orphan. But things were different now. Jing Yunjiao was Mayor Shu's niece. Plus, she was pretty and had good grades. What kind of boyfriend couldn't she find in the future? In comparison, Han Nan looked a bit too stubborn. He didn't even have the spark he used to have. Han Nan scrambled to his feet. He looked like he wanted to charge forward again, but Jing Yunjiao's threatening glare forced him to restrain himself and obediently return to his seat. For the entire day, Jing Yunjiao could feel the hidden bitterness in Han Nan's eyes. Even the teachers couldn't help but glance at her, as if she'd really done something wrong. Jing Yunjiao completely ignored Han Nan, and there was nothing he could do about it. A few days later, there was finally some progress on Shenxi's case. The men sent by Shu Yuantarek in secret finally found something unusual about Shenxi. It was reasonable to say that after such a big thing happened, if there was someone behind her, she should have contacted for help. However, there had been no movement until recently. Shenxi had been hit harder and harder, and there had been no news from Shuyu for a long time. This made Shenxi feel more restless than before. At night, she went to a nightclub alone. Over there, the people who secretly followed her had taken a picture of a man's silhouette. That man wasn't her DA. He was only 28 or 29 years old. However, he was surrounded by a group of people who were protecting him. The relationship between Shenxi and that man wasn't what they thought. In fact, it was the complete opposite. When Shenxi saw that man, she was like a mouse that had seen a cat. She trembled, and her entire appearance changed. "Uncle, do you know this person?" Jing Yunjiao looked at the silhouette in the picture and asked. Because it was far away, it was very blurry. They could only see that it was a young man. They could only make out a rough outline. If they hadn't seen him before, it would be difficult to recognize him next time. "No, I've never seen him before." Shu Yuantarek also fell into deep thought. Chapter 1107. This man gave him a sense of danger, and he didn't even know when such an opponent had appeared by his side. Looking at his age, he's definitely not Shu Yu's biological father. Jing Yunjiao thought for a moment and asked, "Does first uncle still remember who you were hostile to at the party?" Thinking about it carefully, Shenxi had always been in public these years. If her man was rich and powerful, he should have known. How could he tolerate it? It was even possible that he had been secretly communicating with her. If that was the case, there would be some clues left behind. But first uncle was such a shrewd person, but he didn't find out what Shenxi did in private all these years. The only explanation was that she had almost nothing to do with that man, and they almost never met. At that time, there was one person. Shu Yuantarek thought for a moment and said, "At that time, since I wanted to be promoted, there would definitely be people blocking my way. At that time, I had a good friend who secretly plotted against me. He even drugged me. Later, when I found out, it was naturally a blow. Then, someone sent him to prison. But not long after, he offended someone in prison and was beaten to death. Did that person have a child? Jing Yunjiao suddenly asked. Shu Yuantarek thought for a moment. After a while, his eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of understanding. Yes. I remember that after that person went to prison, a woman went to visit him. That woman brought a child. The child was about 8 or 9 years old. At that time, I suspected that he was the illegitimate child of my political enemy. I secretly watched him for a while, but not long after, that woman fell ill and died. The child was also adopted by a relative. I thought that there shouldn't be any problems, so I didn't pay any more attention to him. After saying that, Shu Yuantarek looked at the photo carefully, and his eyebrows gradually furrowed. This face was indeed somewhat similar to the man in her memory. At that time, his friend also had a bright future. The two of them were very competitive, but they could be said to appreciate each other. His friend was a few years older than him and could talk to him. However, they slowly began to disagree on many things. He gradually discovered that his friend was a complete scum who had done a lot of bad things in private and had repeatedly set him up. Against such a sinister enemy, he would never hold back. Therefore, he went all out to kill this person. To be honest, after he went to prison, he also had a part to play. Otherwise, this person would not have died so early. This was not the only person he had harmed, but this person had left the deepest impression on him. That person was called Jin Kaiyang, and he was once considered an influential figure. Zhao, pay more attention to your surroundings. This person is not simple. Shu Yuantarek reminded him. But now that he knew who the other party was, it was better than having no news at all. Jing Yunjiao nodded. She was not afraid. There were not many people who could hurt her. Since we have caught such a big fish, uncle, let me deal with Shenxi. Jing Yunjiao's eyes flashed as she spoke. Ever since she'd arrived in the capital, Shenxi had harmed her many times. Now, it was time for her to settle the score. What are you going to do? Shu Yuantarek asked. Of course, I can't let her live. Jing Yunjiao said directly. Shu Yuantarek glanced at her and did not refute. Just think about it, Shenxi had been by his side for so many years. She should have given a lot of information to that man. Based on this point, Shenxi deserved to die. Chapter 1108. At this time, in the quiet villa, Shenxi was holding a bottle of red wine and drinking non-stop. Her whole body swayed as she sank into the sofa. She had lost. She had suffered a crushing defeat, and there was no doubt about it. Now that Shentong was back, she had no choice but to give up her position. She had been relying on Shu Yuanzi for so many years, and her reputation had been given to her by him. Now, she could easily take it back, but she was still unwilling. It was all Jing Yunjiao's fault. She had hidden Shu Yu. And Shu Wencheng, that man, had not made a move on Shentong. All her schemes had failed. She really didn't know if she was born to not fight with others. At this time, Jing Yunjiao directly jumped up to the second floor and entered the living room through the room on the second floor. When she saw this scene, she was a little surprised, but not sympathetic. When Shentong saw her, her reaction was not very strong. She just pointed at her and said, "You really came, little bastard." "Shenxi, Shu Yu is a bastard." "I'm not." Jing Yunjiao's cold voice came. "What are you doing here? Do you want to kill me? You won't. If you really do that, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Shenxi suddenly smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "So what if I lost? I can't be Mrs. Shu. So what if my reputation is ruined? But I still won one thing." Shenxi's words were strange and incoherent. Jing Yunjiao didn't take it to heart. She just said, "Shu Yu is the son of my uncle's political enemy, right? And the man you met that day is Shu Yu's half-brother, right?" Shenxi was stunned. "Yes. Can you kill him? So what if you know? You can't do anything to him." Shenxi sneered. "It seems that you hate that man. But he has helped you many times, hasn't he? Those so-called killers you found were all helped by him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do it so secretly." Jing Yunjiao asked slowly. "What do you know?" Shenxi's eyes suddenly widened, That lunatic Jiniran, if it weren't for him, my son wouldn't have become like that. If Yu was obedient, do you think your uncle would kill him again and again? Jiniran. Jing Yunjiao noted the name down. Yu was very cute when he was very young. Although he was a little naughty, which child doesn't want to play? But one day, Yu suddenly turned bad. After a long time, I found out that it was Jiniran who did it. Can you believe it? A teenager dares to lay his hands on his own younger brother. That's impossible. Jiniran's parents died and he was adopted by his relatives. He doesn't have the ability to do that. Jing Yunjiao refuted. Haha, Jiniran's mother didn't die of illness. She was raped to death. He saw it with his own eyes. Do you think your uncle is a good person? He is a devil who doesn't even spare women and children. After Jiniran's mother died, he was adopted, but it was only for 3 years. He suffered a lot. Your uncle kept oppressing the family, causing the relatives to bully Jiniran day and night. One day, Jiniran ran away and met his adoptive father. He used his adoptive father's power to find us. Shunxi's eyes were bloodshot. She didn't seem to be lying. However, Jing Yunjiao didn't believe it. If it was her uncle who killed Jiniran's father, she felt that it was possible. But if it was her uncle who found someone to rape Jiniran's mother, she wouldn't agree. Moreover, if it was true, Jiniran wouldn't be alive now. If he could be so vicious to women, why would he leave a scourge behind? Chapter 1109. Jing Yunjiao scrutinized Shunxi and asked, "Do you know who Jiniran's adoptive father is?" "I only know that he's from the underworld." However, he was already very old when he adopted Jiniran. He passed away a few years ago. It's useless even if you want to find him. Shunxi did not hide the truth. She continued, "Jing Yunjiao, I've told you everything you asked me. Where's Shu Yu? Where are you hiding my son?" Even now, the arrest warrant for Shu Yu was still there, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find him. Many people suspected that she was the one who had hidden her son. The police had searched the entire place several times. Every time she told people that Jing Yunjiao was the one who had hidden her son, no one believed her. It was ridiculous. "Shu Yu. Do you think he's still alive?" Jing Yunjiao's eyes were cold. He walked to the kitchen and came out with a fruit knife. The handle of the knife was wrapped in a towel, and the blade shone with a cold light. Shunxi's body stiffened when she saw it. "Jing Yunjiao, if you kill me, you'll never know where Shu Xianlan is." Shunxi stood up shakily. The wine bottle in her hand fell to the ground, and red liquid splashed out. Shunxi looked at her provocatively. Jing Yunjiao's face changed. "What do you mean? You should know why I had such a big reaction when I first saw you." Shunxi smiled. "The Shu family doesn't even know about your existence, but I do. Don't you feel suspicious?" That's right. She did feel that something was wrong at that time. "What did you do to my mother?" Jing Yunjiao asked coldly. "I've already answered all your questions, but you killed my son. Do you think I'm still so stupid? My son is dead. I'll make you feel uneasy for the rest of your life," Shunxi said with hatred. She hated that she was not as lucky as Shen Tong. He was not as lucky as Jing Yunjiao. Even though they were both pregnant, Shen Hong's father was Shu Yuantarek while her son's father was a dead fool. So what if he was dead? Why did he tell Jiniran about her and her son's identities? All these years, Jiniran had been secretly getting people to lead her son astray and threaten her. She had to live in fear every single moment of her life. There was also Shu Xianlan. She should never have known about something she shouldn't have known. Shu Xianlan had bitterly begged her, but Shu Xianlan still wanted her to explain to Shu Yuantarek. Shu Xianlan had forced her into a dead end. How could she not kill her? However, Jiniran had not appeared at that time, and she did not have any trustworthy people in her hands. Otherwise, why would the assassin spare Jing Yunjiao's life? "Do you think that I will believe a lie that you casually come up with?" Jing Yunjiao restrained the excitement in his heart and said coldly. Based on Shunxi's character, if she had targeted her mother, she would never have spared her life. "Believe it or not, as long as I die, Shu Xianlan will really disappear from this world. She will even be burned to ashes. Jing Yunjiao, aren't you very powerful? If you have the ability, why don't you kill me now? Shunshi laughed arrogantly. When Jing Yunjiao heard this, he walked over with a smile and stabbed her in the shoulder. Shunshi suddenly widened her eyes. Her face was ferocious and she felt the blood flowing out of her body. She could not believe it and said, don't you care where Shu Xianlan is? After dealing with you for so long, I can understand your temperament. Jing Yunjiao's face was expressionless as she continued, I believe that the reason why my mother didn't return from Huaning County back then was because of you, but I don't believe that you left her alive. Moreover, if she's really still alive, then all the more reason for you to die. Chapter 11:10. After Jing Yunjiao finished speaking, she pulled out the sharp blade from her shoulder and said coldly, Tell me, is she dead or alive? If she let her go today, even if Shu Xianlan was still alive, she would kill her. She wasn't stupid. At this time, Shunshi fell backward, covering her wound and sinking into the sofa. She gritted her teeth and refused to say anything. Jing Yunjiao smiled faintly and wasn't in a hurry. Suddenly, she pulled the unconscious Shu Yu out of her space. Shunshi saw that there was another person in front of her without any warning and was instantly shocked. When she looked again, this person was actually Shu Yu. She immediately wanted to pounce on him, but Jing Yunjiao's eyes were extremely cold as she continued, If you don't speak, the one who will suffer will be him. Shunshi's eyes widened. Jing Yunjiao clearly said that Shu Yu was dead. No, why did Shu Yu suddenly appear in front of her? Jing Yunjiao, how could she make someone suddenly? At this moment, Shunshi's heart was filled with fear. When she thought about how Jing Yunjiao had appeared from the second floor, she became even more afraid. It was as if the person in front of her was a monster. She quickly wanted to escape, but at this moment, her wound was in extreme pain. Fresh blood kept flowing out. Even the slightest movement would affect Aunt Tong's whole body, causing extreme pain. Jing Yunjiao, what are you? Shunshi said in fear. I will give you a few seconds to think about it. Otherwise, not only will your son be in pain, you will also be. You have seen it. I can make Shu Yu appear silently, so I can also make you disappear quietly from this world. You will be under my control for the rest of your lives and never be able to rise again, Jing Yunjiao said deliberately. However, the ruthlessness in her eyes couldn't be deceived. Shunshi had seen the moment she transformed into Shu Yu. Naturally, she believed her words without a doubt. Her whole body was trembling. Shu Xianlan, she is dead. Seeing Jing Yunjiao approaching, Shunshi only felt her mind go blank and fell into fear. She quickly opened her mouth and said. As soon as she said this, she knew she was finished. Jing Yunjiao had secrets on her. If it was her, she would also choose to kill her to silence her. She and Shu Yu were both finished. How did she die? Where was she buried? Jing Yunjiao continued to ask. Shunshi was desperate and no longer resisted. Back then, Shu Xianlan and I were very close, but she knew a lot of people. One day, she brought a patient home. That patient had worked in a hotel before and knew that the person with Shu Yuanzi couldn't have been me, so he told Shu Xianlan. Your mother was really a fool. Instead of taking the initiative to explain the situation to her brother, she questioned me. I told her that the child was innocent and hoped that she would give me a chance to slowly explain to Shu Yuanzi. She actually believed me. Shunshi's eyes were full of mockery. She had never seen such a stupid woman in her life. Not long after, she eloped with Li Tianyi. I heaved a sigh of relief. I knew that she was too kind, especially when she trusted the people around her too much. So as long as I begged her, she would give me time. But later, when she was about to give birth, she suddenly went back on her words and forced me to explain everything to your uncle immediately. How could I be willing to do that? I found an opportunity to trick her into giving me her address and told it to your grandfather, Li Wenbo. The Li family would never allow their son to be with a daughter of the Shu family. So, Li Wenbo quickly caught your father and brought him back. I heard that there was a problem on the way back. Li Tianyi's legs were broken by someone sent by his biological father to prevent him from escaping again. And Shu Xianlan, she just gave birth, so I sent someone to kill her. But I didn't expect that the killer would throw you away. Chapter 11:11. Shunshi smiled sadly. Thinking of Shu Xianlan, she didn't know whether it was mockery or nostalgia. Her expression was complicated. Why are you so sure that my mother is dead? That assassin let me go, maybe. Halfway through Jing Yunzhao's words, Shunshi sneered. Don't be silly. I paid so much money. If I wasn't sure that she was dead, how could I give up? Later, after I met Jiniran, I asked him to send someone to investigate. There was indeed a person buried on that hill. There were still rags left inside. Of course, there were also your mother's belongings. Speaking of this, Shunshi's eyes flashed with a trace of absent-mindedness. She had done many things, but she had never regretted it, nor felt that she had done anything wrong. But Shu Xianlan was different. She was the only woman who had made her feel guilty. Although she had harmed Shentong, her biological sister, ever since they were young, Shentong had always been more outstanding than her. She was younger than her, but she had received more praise than her. Her father had always been gentler to Shentong than to her. It was Shentong who had snatched away her love, family, and everything that originally belonged to her. Therefore, even if Shentong had died, she would not feel uneasy. But Shu Xianlan was a silly woman. That year, she entered the Shu family with trepidation. She was extremely afraid of everything in the Shu family. She was afraid that the servants would say that she had become a phoenix from a branch. She was afraid that outsiders would point fingers at her. She was afraid that those rich madams would look down on her. Shu Yuantarek was a cold-hearted man. He had no feelings for her. How could he help her? The only person who helped her was Shu Xianlan. She taught her the etiquette of the upper class and calmed her down. For a long time, she had treated Shu Xianlan as a friend and a sister. Unfortunately, even this silly woman had betrayed her in the end. Your mother was too gentle. Even if she didn't die in my hands, she wouldn't have lived long. Shunshi said softly. Then she said, sometimes, I really wonder if you are really Shu Xianlan's daughter. You look so much like her, but why are your characters so different? Shu Xianlan was a standard traditional woman. She was docile, virtuous, and gentle. God had never been stingy with her. The first half of her life was the happiest in the world. Her parents doted on her, her brother doted on her, and the man she liked was even willing to give up his family for her. Wasn't that enough? If she had such a past, she wouldn't have ended up like this. I won't be as stupid as my mother. Raising a tiger will only invite calamity, Jing Yunzhao said coldly. Finally, he asked, where is she buried? I only know that there is a small hill in that town. When I buried her, I asked the other party to mark the place where she was buried. The words Lan were carved on the trees nearby. You just have to dig 3 meters down when you find the place. Shunshi stopped struggling and said weakly. After Shunshi finished speaking, Jing Yunzhao raised his hand and directly slit her neck with the knife. After you die, he will be the murderer. New grudges and old grudges must be avenged. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have led a wandering life for so many years. In her previous life, she wouldn't have died without knowing who her parents were. Shunshi's pupils suddenly dilated. She looked at Shu Yu with a face full of unwillingness. However, blood spurted out, and there was no way to stop him. Blood covered the ground, but Jing Yunzhao's body didn't have a single drop of blood on it. Soon, she stopped breathing. Jing Yunzhao looked at her body and expressionlessly stuffed the fruit knife into Shu Yu's hand. He took out a silver needle and inserted it into several acupuncture points on the top of Shu Yu's head. Then, he left. Shu Yu woke up about 10 minutes after Jing Yunzhao left. However, the moment he opened his eyes, he was a bit sluggish. His legs couldn't move, so he sat in a pool of blood, holding the fruit knife in a daze. It wasn't until another day later that the police came to search for Shu Yu after the public reported that they saw Shunshi hiding Shu Yu. Chapter 11:12. In the house, Shunshi's body was already emitting an unpleasant smell. Shu Yu fainted from hunger. The scene shocked the people who were searching the house. However, they were able to catch Shu Yu on the spot. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, this person was a fool. They couldn't get anything out of him. In the end, Shu Yuantarek made the decision to send him to a mental hospital to be isolated. He didn't take his son's life. Shu Yu had done a lot of bad things over the years. In Jing Yunzhao's opinion, he deserved it. It's just that even though Jing Yunzhao knew the whereabouts of her biological mother, she didn't dare to tell her family about it. After so many years, her mother had disappeared without a trace even after receiving medical treatment. Her maternal grandparents and uncles only fantasized that she was living peacefully in some corner of Yang province. If she were to tell them that her mother had really died, she didn't know if they would be able to accept it. Especially for grandfather Shu, it would be a huge blow. Even though they knew in their hearts that their mother was most likely dead, it was still better than seeing her being dug out from the wilderness with their own eyes. However, this body had to be moved out. Jing Yunzhao thought about it for a few days and decided to take a leave. She personally went back to Huaning County. She would stay with the Shu family for 3 to 4 days every week. Shu Yuantarek and the others didn't expect her to go back to Huaning County all of a sudden. Why do you want to go back? Didn't your grandpa Gan come here a while ago? Shu Yuantarek was very confused. Logically speaking, other than Grandpa Gan's family, there shouldn't be anyone close to her in Huaning County. I want to go back and take a look at the fruits and vegetables I planted. You don't have to worry about me. I'll be back soon. Jing Yunzhao lied casually. I'll go with you. Shu Wancheng said in the next second. No need. Just as she rejected him, Jing Yunzhao looked up at second uncle. She thought for a while and said, Second uncle, can go with me. When she thought about how she had to hide the news of her mother's death from everyone in the family, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. After thinking about it carefully, if she told her second uncle the truth, it would be feasible. When her mother left, her second uncle wasn't very old. In comparison, their relationship wasn't as deep as grandpa and first uncle's. Shu Wancheng was in a good mood when he heard that Jing Yunzhao had changed his mind. I can take a good look at the place where our Xiao Zhao grew up. By the way, you didn't tell that guy from the Li family, did you? Not yet. She did want to tell him. Needless to say, with me around, do you still need him? The corners of Shu Wancheng's mouth curled up, and he was very proud. Jing Yunzhao realized that this second uncle of hers was becoming more and more childish. Thinking back to the first time she saw him, she was still a little stunned and felt that he was very imposing and awe-inspiring. But in private, he was really. If outsiders saw them, they would probably think that they were two different people. At this time, Jing Yunzhao was also a little embarrassed. She was going to leave the capital and move the grave. It would probably take a few days. If Li Xiaoyun knew, he would definitely accompany her. And if she didn't tell him, the consequences would be very serious. But now that he saw his second uncle's eager gaze, Jing Yunzhao swallowed the rest of his words. He would go back and tell his second uncle in private. After he knew, he probably wouldn't have the time to be jealous of Li Xiaoyun. Jing Yunzhao reported to her family in advance and prepared to return the next day. Chapter 11-13. In addition to her and Shu Wancheng, Xiao Haiqing also went back with them. Her TV series had finished filming, and she had just finished her job 2 days ago. She just had some time left. She didn't go back during the new year, so she didn't know how her blood-related brother and stepmother were doing. Shu Wancheng didn't have any opinion about Xiao Haiqing, but when he saw Li Xiaoyun appear as scheduled, he instantly became hostile. Second uncle, don't be angry. This time, I really have something important to do in Huaning County. Taking advantage of the fact that her second uncle's anger hadn't been ignited, Jing Yunzhao quickly said first. Xiao Zhao, what's wrong? When Shu Wancheng saw Jing Yunzhao's serious look, he had a bad feeling. Jing Yunzhao had already told Li Xiaoyun about the matter in advance, so he was very sensible and sat in the driver's seat, so that Shu Wancheng wouldn't be distracted when he heard the truth and be in danger. The car started. Even if Shu Wancheng didn't want to, he accepted the fact. Second uncle, I'm going back to Huaning County this time to bring my mother back, Jing Yunzhao said seriously. You. Shu Wancheng's expression froze. He was stunned for a moment, as if he didn't understand her meaning. He said with some shock, "Xiao Jiao, what do you mean? My sister, she is still alive." Jing Yunjiao shook her head. When Xu Wancheng heard this, his whole heart fell to the bottom. When Shunxi died, she told the truth. "That year, she killed my mother and buried her in a mountain next to Huaning County," Jing Yunjiao said softly. She knew about the mountain in Huaning County. It was called Dayang Mountain. It covered a large area and almost connected all the nearby villages together. It was not easy to find a few trees in it. However, since Jin Yiran could send people to do it, there should be something special about it. Once she arrived at the place, she would be able to find it after studying it carefully. Jing Yunjiao's words made Xu Wancheng's face pale. He clenched his fists. "My sister treated Shunxi well. Why did she? Because she knew that Shunxi was an imposter." After thinking about it, this was the most likely reason. Although he was only 12 years old when he didn't have any news of his sister, his memory of her had always been very deep. She was a woman with a bit of gentleness. She was diligent, hardworking, liked making medicine and medical skills, and knew a lot of things. When his father was obsessed with medicine, his sister and brother took care of him and taught him a lot of things. He knew his sister's temper. She could never be cruel to her family. Although her mind was clear and exquisite, she liked to leave a chance for others. She didn't like to fight and only guarded her own side of the world. She regarded everything around her as extremely important and cherished it very much. If she knew that Shunxi was an imposter at that time, she would definitely not use the most direct method to solve it. Instead, she would discuss it with Shunxi privately. After all, she treated Shunxi as a friend and family member. This was the biggest difference between his sister and the two brothers. Because she was the only girl in the family, her parents had raised her more meticulously, which had created her personality. She was destined to suffer losses. Shunxi. Xu Wancheng clenched his fists. Everyone could feel the raging anger in his heart. Xiao Haiqing, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but glance at him. She was a little surprised. When he first met his uncle, Jing Yunjiao, he didn't feel that he was unreasonable. The second time, he felt that he was a little inexplicable. But this time, he suddenly felt that he seemed to be a little different from before. Chapter 11:14. Xu Yuancheng's whole person became solemn. His slightly red eyes revealed his sadness as he turned his head to look out of the window. "Your mother's remains cannot be moved into the Xu family cemetery," Xu Wancheng said after a while. "The Xu family's cemetery is guarded every day, so it's impossible for you to bury someone there. When the time comes, your grandfather and first uncle will find out. Especially your grandfather, he might not be able to take the blow. Although he'll find out about this sooner or later, it's best to drag it out until the right time. Also, your mother is already married. Although some people think that she eloped, she and Li Tianyi are still a legitimate couple. I believe that if she was still alive, she would only be willing to be buried with Li Tianyi in the Jing family's cemetery," he added. Xu Wancheng was talking about the Jing family, not the Li family. He wanted Jing Yunjiao to think of a way to clear Li Tianyi's name. He wanted to bury the two of them in the Jing family cemetery openly after Li Tianyi passed away. The Jing and Xu families had always been on the same side. The old residents used to be together, so the cemetery should be the same. Jing Yunjiao was silent for a while. He thought for a while and said, "Then let's move the remains out of there first. Then find a place with good feng shui for mother to stay for a while. In the future, I will take back everything that belongs to the Jing family." Now, Li Tianyi's father was not even a member of the Jing family. What right did her mother have to be buried in the Jing family? It was the same for her. She had yet to acknowledge her ancestors, and Immortal Crane Hall did not know her identity. However, it was time for the Li family to pay back their debts, including her mother's life. Although Shunxi was the mastermind behind her mother's death, if Li Wenbo's grandfather hadn't stubbornly taken her father away from Huaning County, her mother wouldn't have been left alone and helpless. Every injustice had its perpetrator, and every debt had its debtor. Shunxi had already taken her share, and the next one would be her so-called biological grandfather. Jing Yunzhao's eyes flashed with a trace of serenity. Xu Wancheng was almost silent the entire way. He was immersed in his memories. It was all about Xu Xianlan's past. She used to be such a beautiful woman. She should have been the center of attention, but she ended up in a foreign land. Li Xiaoyun had never been a person who took the initiative to stir up trouble, not to mention that Xu Wancheng was Jing Yunzhao's uncle. If Xu Wancheng hadn't always taken the initiative to bicker with him, with Li Xiaoyun's temper, he would have been too lazy to bother with him. At this moment, he was very tactful and didn't say a word. It was rare that he didn't show off his affection in front of Xu Wancheng. He had always been a person with a sense of propriety. He knew very well when he should restrain himself and step back. Second uncle, do you know how my father, Li Tianyi, is doing now? Jing Yunzhao asked on the way. Him? Xu Wancheng raised his voice. I don't think so. Putting aside the word Li Tianyi was the most worthy person in the world for Xu Xianlan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked his elder brother for help back then. Jing Yunzhao pursed her lips. She hadn't even seen her father yet. She had made such a big fuss when she was reunited with her relatives, but she didn't see the Li family come to her door. It seemed that her grandfather didn't care about her existence at all. However, all the people in the world came for profit, and all the people in the world went for profit. What if he revealed all his trump cards? That biological grandfather would at least look sideways, right? Jing Yunzhao thought so and immediately sent a text message to Qin Shuai and Pak Yuan. It was time to announce it. Only then would the person she wanted to find come to her door. Chapter 11:15. It was a few hours' drive from the capital to Huaning County. Xu Wancheng wasn't a man who only knew how to be sad. Although he couldn't accept it at first, he restrained his emotions after a while. It was enough for him to keep the pity and reluctance in his heart. There was no need to affect others. Jing Yunzhao hadn't returned for more than half a year, but in this short period of time, she felt as if things had remained the same, but the people had changed. Every day in the past, she had lived her life to the fullest, which was why she felt as if time had passed by exceptionally slowly. Xu Yuancheng had also come here once a few years ago for the old man, but he was driven away by the old man. Since then, he had never come here again. This county was actually very big, and it had developed well. If you don't mind, when we find Auntie Lan's remains, we can temporarily store them in our Li family's cemetery, Li Xiaoyun suggested. The Li family's ancestors were long gone. During the war, there were dead people everywhere. How could they bury them so meticulously? At that time, many people casually dug a big hole after they died, threw many bodies in, and then filled it up. It was the same for his great-grandfather and great-grandmother. They died before the old man became a soldier, and their bodies were long gone. Later, they bought a big cemetery and built a cenotaph. It was called the Li family's ancestral grave. However, other than the cenotaph of his great-grandfather and great-grandmother, there were other graves. They were all soldiers who died without being martyrs. There was no place to bury them after they died, or their names were not remembered at all. All these years, his grandfather's brothers on the battlefield, as well as the brothers in his memory. The names were engraved on a tall stone tablet. Row by row, there were already countless names. Every year, he seemed to come back to pay respects to his ancestors, but in fact, his intention was to pay respects to those brave souls. At this moment, Xu Wancheng and Jing Yunzhao nodded in agreement. But little Zhao, that Dayang mountain isn't small, right? How can we find a few trees with the word Lan engraved on it on such a big mountain? Xu Wancheng even began to think about spending more money to ask the nearby villagers to help search. However, Jing Yunzhao had already thought about this question along the way and had an answer. There are quite a few villages and towns near Dayang Mountain. The place where the body can be buried must not have many residents. At the same time, it's convenient to go up the mountain. Other than that, it should be at least a few hundred meters away from the mountain. Otherwise, a 3-meter hole would be easily discovered. Jing Yunzhao continued, the person who made a move on my mother back then definitely wasn't a local. It's impossible for them to openly bring her to a place that's too far away. Therefore, I'm guessing that it should be near the old train station. Moreover, those trees are definitely around 20 years old. We should be able to find it. Back then, that person might have kidnapped her and thrown her to another place after that. Xu Wencheng also felt that what Jing Yunjiao said made sense. However, it was already late, so he planned to search again the next day. At night, the two men stayed at Li Xiaoyun's Fragrant Sea restaurant. Jing Yunjiao accompanied Xiao Haiqing to stay in the old house that her mother had left for her. The house had been empty for a long time, so it should have had a dusty smell. However, when the two went back to take a look, the house was brightly lit. If not for the bright lights, the two would have thought that there was a burglar in the house. Let's go in. It should be my dad, Xiao Haiqing said without a change in her expression. She had long been used to her father's behavior. Xiao Haiqing opened the door and took a look. Sure enough, she saw Xiao Daoan and Jiang Rong walking out of the bedroom. When Jiang Rong saw Xiao Haiqing, her face instantly turned pale and her lips trembled. It was your father who let me stay here. Chapter 11:16. Jiang Rong knew Xiao Haiqing's temper. Living in this house without her permission would definitely make her unhappy. If Xiao Haiqing was unhappy, then the one suffering would be her. Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. She changed her shoes and pulled Jing Yunjiao in, glancing at Xiao Daoan. Daddy, are you missing my mom? I've kept her photo. I'll take it out now and light some incense. As Xiao Haiqing spoke, she walked to a tall square cabinet in the house and slowly took out a photo frame. After wiping it, she placed it on the cabinet. There was a small cauldron of incense ash on the cabinet. Xiao Haiqing took out the incense, knelt and kowtowed a few times before placing the incense on it. Then, she handed 3 incense sticks to Xiao Daoan with a smile, looking like she was doing something natural. Xiao Daoan was a little surprised. He didn't even have time to talk to his daughter, but he was going to light incense for his late wife. But after thinking about it carefully, it made sense. That woman had worked hard for him her whole life. She didn't give him any trouble even when she was dying, unlike Jiang Rong, who was restless. Xiao Daoan took it and bowed a few times before placing the incense in it. Then, he said, "Aren't you in school? Why are you back at this time?" Just like Daddy, I missed Mom and wanted to come back to see her. Xiao Haiqing was still very gentle. Jing Yunjiao still remembered how Xiao Haiqing used to be angry and impulsive when facing Xiao Daoan. She would quarrel with him at the slightest disagreement, and her face would turn red. It wasn't until she was completely hurt that she slowly restrained herself. In front of her father, she started to be indifferent and handled things appropriately. Xiao Daoan blushed. He looked at his late wife's photo. The reason he came over was for this house. He wanted to sell this house. Business wasn't easy. He had offended people in Serene City and had been suppressed. Now, a few 100,000 was a huge sum to him. Not only that, he had already sold the villa he bought in Serene City and changed it to a small apartment building. He had also sold his car for cash flow. Recently, he had received a contract, and the other party only gave him a deposit. If he wanted to do well, he had to invest more money. And this house, no matter how small a fly was, it was still meat. This house should be worth about 500,000. It was just that he hadn't been here for a long time and didn't know how the house was doing, so he wanted to take a look and see if there was anything that could be kept or thrown away. But now that his daughter said that, he didn't know what to say. However, Xiao Haiqing knew very well that the reason she came home this time was because she heard from Jiang Rong that her father wanted to sell her mother's house. But she couldn't be blamed. If she wasn't obedient, she wouldn't be able to see her biological son. And most importantly, if she said a few words, she would say, she would be beaten up. A woman who had left the Xiao family and had nowhere else to go was destined to be restrained. Xiao Haiqing and Jing Yunjiao sat down. Xiao Daoan was a little embarrassed, but Xiao Haiqing didn't seem to notice, especially when Jing Yunjiao was present. Xiao Daoan hesitated, not knowing if he should say that he was short of money and wanted to sell the house. He was afraid that Xiao Haiqing would be angry. If Jing Yunjiao stood up for her and Elder Tang and the others put pressure on him, he would be finished. But if he wasn't Xiao Haiqing's father, he probably wouldn't have a foothold in the family. The only reason he was still alive was because Xiao Haiqing couldn't solve the knot in her heart. "Oh right, Dad, I've been eyeing a role recently and need some money to get through. Can you help me?" "Don't worry, as long as this role is successful, the money earned will definitely be doubled," Xiao Haiqing suddenly said. Chapter 11:17. Xiao Haiqing's tone was very soft, as if she was pleading. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but turn to look at her, knowing that she was lying. After Xiao Haiqing played the role of Xin Han, she became very famous. That set photo even went viral on the internet, and she was called the most promising actress at the moment. Even after the filming of the TV series ended, she didn't stay idle during this period. She recorded a song for the crew, and it was already set as the theme song. Other than that, she also appeared in front of many variety shows and the public. Many scripts were looking for her, but she was still waiting for the TV series to explode in popularity before she would consider choosing a script. After all, there would be many good scripts to choose from. She wasn't considered rich, but she definitely wasn't short on money, and it was even more impossible for her to buy a role. Xiao Daoan frowned. "How much do you need?" 500,000, Xiao Haiqing replied. When Xiao Daoan heard that, he was instantly unhappy. 500,000 might not have been a problem in the past, but it wasn't a small sum to him now. Was it worth it to invest such a large sum of money on his daughter? He also knew that his daughter was studying acting, and would occasionally search online. He also knew that she was a little famous now, and seemed to be able to earn money. "I heard that you're already acting, so there should be a fee, right? Can't this small sum of money be settled?" Xiao Daoan said casually. Xiao Haiqing sneered in her heart. Small sum of money? She had just started out. In the past, she only acted as small extras. Sometimes, she only made 100 or 200 yuan a day, and she had to work herself to death to act in some dangerous scenes. Although she could be considered the third female lead in Eunuch's Palace, she was still a newcomer and couldn't be compared to those big shots. She wouldn't ask her father for money or things that didn't belong to her. 500,000, no more, no less, was enough to buy this house. By then, he wouldn't have any reason to threaten her with this house. "Dad, I'm still a newcomer. I don't have much money, and I've already paid the school's fees. I don't have much left, only enough to live on." Xiao Haiqing was in a difficult position. Since she had already spoken, it was up to her father to decide. If he gave her the money, she would use the 500,000 to buy the house. In the end, she would still maintain the status quo and would not let him lose anything. However, if he still wanted to sell the house after rejecting her, he could not blame her for not being polite. She would still buy it herself, but by then, his loss would be more than 500,000 yuan. When she left the capital, she already had a thorough understanding of the situation in her father's company. She was ready to deal him a critical blow at any time. Xiao Daoan considered it carefully for a while. Although he felt that his daughter did have a future, he also felt that it was better to believe in himself than to believe in others. What if his daughter didn't have a fire? Then wouldn't the money be wasted? If that was the case, it would be better to invest the money in his business. It would be a sure win. "Haiqing, I don't think it's a good idea to spend money on a character. It's definitely not reliable. You have to be down to earth. Daddy can't give you the money since our family isn't the same as before. Besides, the company is in a tough spot now. I think, let's sell this house first. When Daddy gets his money back, I'll see if I can buy it back. Besides, Daddy has experience. It will definitely get better and better in the future. When that time comes, Daddy will think of a way for you to get any character you want," Xiao Daoan still said. Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled, her eyes flickering. Now, he was teaching her to be down to earth. Who was the one who sold his daughter for glory? Chapter 11:18. Xiao Haiqing's face was still smiling. Jiang Rong had seen Xiao Haiqing like this many times. She shuddered and tactfully kept her head down without saying a word. She didn't know when it started, but she was convinced that Xiao Haiqing had grown up and was no longer the little girl she used to control. Not only that, but she even had the ability to make her afraid. She was like a poisonous snake, and she was always worried that she would be bitten. Since Dad said so, then I can only give up. But, do I have to sell the house? My grandparents left it to my mother, and my mother left it to me. In theory, it's my property, Dad, Xiao Haiqing reminded. You don't need it now, right? After we earn this money back, Dad will buy you a bigger one in the capital, Xiao Daoan said shamelessly. Jing Yunjiao had already experienced Xiao Daoan's hypocritical fatherly act. At this moment, he didn't even have the slightest bit of shock or anger. It would be a waste of her feelings for this kind of unhappiness. Buy a bigger one? Xiao Haiqing smiled. If Dad is so insistent, then all right. But this is the place where Mom lived. I want to choose the buyer myself. Is that okay? Xiao Daoan was delighted. He didn't expect Xiao Haiqing to be so easy to talk to. If his daughter was unwilling, it wouldn't look good if he forced the sale. If Xiao Haiqing quarreled with him again, he would feel embarrassed. But now, he didn't have to sell the house secretly. Choosing a buyer wasn't a big deal. The location of this house was not bad. If the news of selling the house was spread, there should be many people interested. He could definitely find a satisfactory buyer. Okay, it's up to you. Xiao Daoan slapped his thigh and was very straightforward. Xiao Haiqing laughed. She seemed to be cooperating, but she was actually very cold. At night, Jing Yunjiao and Xiao Haiqing slept in the same room. He couldn't help but ask, "Do you want to buy the house in my name first? It's useless for you to buy it. If he finds out, he'll still have ideas about the house. But can you ask second Uncle Shu for help later? He's a new face, and he seems more suitable," Xiao Haiqing said. If it was Li Xiaoyun, it would feel weird. Shu Wencheng at least had the aura of a businessman. Although it didn't suit this house, it was better than Li Xiaoyun's. Li Xiaoyun was more like a house demolisher. No problem. I'll help you pay for this money for now. Although I didn't earn much, Jiang had a lot but I didn't earn much, but I did. Xiao Haiqing, Xiao, but I didn't, I sold sold my clothes and mice. My, that. And that, and his tea. Jiang Rong's collection of branded bags and shoes was not little. Other than that, she also had some jewelry. 500,000 yuan was more than enough. She was taking precautions. Of course, she still had to pretend to be poor in front of her father. Originally, she didn't plan to use the money from selling things. She just wanted to keep a backup plan. Now, it seemed that she had become a prophet. "Oh, I have something to tell you. It's about the businesses under my hands." Jing Yunjiao lay on the bed. The room was quiet. "You're talking about Yuling Wine and Yunling Pharmaceutical, right?" Xiao Haiqing chuckled and pointed it out. Chapter 11:19. In the dark night, the two of them stared at the ceiling with their eyes wide open. In the darkness, one could vaguely see the faint light in their eyes. "When did you find out?" Jing Yunjiao was a little surprised. She had wanted to tell Xiao Haiqing for a long time, but every time, she would be distracted by other things and then forget about it. Either that, or the timing wasn't right, so she kept delaying it until now. Last time, when Hua Tianxian found out and saw her happy and shocked expression, she was looking forward to seeing Haiqing's reaction. Is it that hard to find out? It's not just me, even Chu Chu and Gan Jinchen knew in their hearts. We've known each other for so long, so it's not like we have to tell each other everything. In the past, I thought you were just selling the wine recipe to Brother Bai, but then I realized that Brother Bai didn't treat you like a business partner or a sister. In short, he was too respectful. Also, at the birthday party last time, President Qin Shui and Brother Bai chatted very happily. The two of them kept staring at you with a proud attitude. When I thought about the names of the two companies, I more or less understood. To think that I was feeling uneasy because I didn't tell you this. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but laugh. Of course, I'm even happier that you're telling me now. Xiao Haiqing sighed and said, but it's such a pity. I live in the same bed as the CEO, but the CEO is a woman. If you were a man, I'd be a rich man's wife now, right? Jing Yunjiao smiled. If I were a man, I'd definitely test the goods first to know if they were to my taste. The moment she finished speaking, even Jing Yunjiao felt like she had fallen. Okay, you're no longer the innocent Jiao Jiao I know. Xiao Haiqing screamed. She couldn't believe that Jing Yunjiao could say such perverted things. Although Li Shao looked like a playboy, he was usually quite gentlemanly. She didn't expect him to lead Jing Yunjiao astray in such a short time. The two of them played around in bed for a while. Xiao Haiqing began to whisper excitedly, should I show off to young Master Li tomorrow? If he knew that you were rolling around on the bed with me tonight, wouldn't he strangle me to death? Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. He definitely would. It was a good night's sleep. When she woke up early in the morning, Jiang Rong had already prepared breakfast. It was quite sumptuous. The way she fawned on Xiao Haiqing was completely different from her stepmother, who always pretended to be weak in the past. The two of them had a simple meal and returned to the hotel. At this time, Li Xiaoyun and Xu Wancheng had already found dozens of people and arranged for them to go to the mountains near the abandoned train station to look for people. The price that the two of them gave was not low, and everyone worked very hard. Moreover, it was just finding a few trees with words written on them and digging a hole a few meters deep. It was not heavy work at all. The mountain was not high, but it stretched for dozens of kilometers. The mountain near the abandoned train station was full of weeds. Some of the weeds were as tall as a person, and they disappeared in an instant. Fortunately, there had never been poisonous snakes in Huaning, so there was no need to worry about safety. However, there were indeed many trees in the mountain, so it would be difficult to find any news in a short time. Come to think of it, Jiniran was only able to find this place because Shunxi had provided him with information about the assassin back then. However, given Shunxi's temperament, she would definitely use this opportunity to get rid of the assassin after meeting Jiniran. Therefore, at this moment, they could only search for the assassin bit by bit. Chapter 11:20. Jing Yunjiao looked at the dense trees and felt a chill in his heart. Not to mention searching this area, even if they had to search the entire mountain several times, they had to find the person. However, on the first day, they returned empty-handed. Although they were anxious to find the person, they weren't so foolish as to act at night. When the sky darkened in the afternoon, they returned the way they came. Jing Yunjiao's face was slightly disappointed, but Xu Wancheng seemed to have gotten over it and looked normal on the surface. For several days, dozens of people searched the mountain non-stop. They offered a high price, and if someone found the person first, they would pay 200,000 yuan as a reward. 200,000 yuan wasn't a small sum to these people, so they were all very serious and didn't worry about them slacking off. Xiao Haiqing got along very well with Xiao Daoan these days, and there weren't any disputes. Xiao Daoan had even passed the house information to the agent, and there were already people looking at the house. Xiao Daoan's mood was naturally very good, but Xiao Haiqing wasn't in a hurry. She told Xu Wancheng about the matter, and only then did he come forward to help. Xu Wancheng didn't expect Xiao Haiqing to have such a bastard father. Although he didn't like to meddle in other people's business, this girl was Jing Yunjiao's good friend after all. Not only that, but she had also been working hard to find the person recently. As repayment, he naturally had to help as much as possible. On this day, Xu Yuancheng changed into extremely ordinary clothes and didn't shave his beard as he entered the house. After looking around a few times, he said decisively, "The house is not bad. We'll do it according to the 500,000 yuan you set. However, all the procedures must be completed. Other than that, you can't take anything from this house. Are you willing?" Because of Xiao Haiqing, Xiao Daoan had been inexplicably offering incense to his deceased wife over and over again these 2 days. The more he did it, the more he felt guilty and wanted to sell the house immediately. Unfortunately, The people who came to look at the house before him mostly thought that the house and the things in the house were too old and tried to lower the price. His asking price wasn't considered high at all, so of course they weren't willing. Now that such a straightforward person suddenly appeared, Xiao Daoan was instantly much happier. Okay. Everything in this house can be left behind. When do you think it's best to go through the procedures? Xiao Daoan immediately asked. There were no treasures in this house. It was already good enough that they could sell them. They were all old antiques. He even despised them in his heart. Xiao Haiqing looked at her father's decisive attitude and couldn't help but sneer. All the things in this house had been used by her mother before, and each of them represented a different meaning. Although the style was a little old, they were well maintained. He was so straightforward, not because he thought it was old, but because he felt disgusted. However, she didn't care about these things as long as the house was hers. Xu Wancheng glanced at Xiao Haiqing and said, "Go through the formalities as soon as possible because I'm in a hurry to move in. In addition, if you sell this house to me, you can't go back on your word. I'll change the lock when the time comes. I don't want the previous owner to always come and disturb me. I hope you can understand. That's what I should do. I've already sold the house. Why would I come here?" "Don't worry," Xiao Daoan immediately said. However, he didn't know why, but when he said that, he felt a little empty in his heart, as if he was missing the most important thing. He subconsciously raised his head to look in the direction of his deceased wife's portrait and felt a chill on his back. Chapter 11:21. Xiao Daoan felt a chill run down his spine. He secretly promised his late wife in his heart that he would buy a bigger house for his daughter in the future. Only then did he feel a little more at ease. Jing Yunjiao and Xiao Haiqing both understood that Xiao Daoan looked like a man with a heavy sense of responsibility on the surface. He valued his identity as a father very much. If business and work were not discussed, he might still be considered a man who cared and loved his daughter a little. However, when it came to money, benefits, and work, anyone would become an expendable object in his eyes. Not only that, but he was also the kind of person who wanted to build a monument to his chastity. He had clearly done something wrong to his daughter, but he still had to remind himself again and again that he was forced to do it. He found excuses for himself, and after comforting himself, once the daughter he had wronged disobeyed him again, he would become aggressive again. Looking at this man, Xu Wancheng felt extreme disdain in his heart. How could a man who couldn't even protect his family deserve the so-called future and achievements? Xiao Daoan lacked money and was in a hurry to use it. The next day, he hurriedly went with Xu Wancheng to go through the procedures. These procedures were not very difficult, and they were completely done in 2 days. Seeing the extra 500,000 in his bank card, he was overjoyed and left with Jiang Rong almost immediately. However, when he was moving out, Xu Wancheng looked at the computer and other items in his hands and sneered. "I seem to have said that if I buy this house, I can't take anything in this house other than the person, right?" Xiao Daoan was stunned. "This computer is mine. The things that were placed at home are now mine." Xu Wancheng instantly turned hostile. These 2 days, Xu Wancheng's attitude was not bad and polite, but now that he suddenly changed, Xiao Daoan was caught off guard and was shocked. "No, this computer and these are all things that I needed when I moved in. They are not originally things in this house." Xiao Daoan continued to explain. "I don't care about that. I only know that when I came to look at the house, these things were all here, and I've already taken photos to keep as evidence. If you take them away now, that's stealing my things. I'm not happy about it." Xu Wancheng sneered. Xiao Daoan's face darkened. He did not expect that the other party would be so calculative. He had spent more than 10,000 renminbi on this computer, and it hadn't been used for long. Other than that, there were a few other electronic products that added up to tens of thousands of RMB. If the other party calculated it this way, then he had sold this house at a loss. Xiao Daoan gritted his teeth. Looking at Xu Wancheng, his eyes were instantly filled with disgust. This person was too evil. He actually dared to scheme against him. However, He also knew that he had suffered a great loss in this matter. It was useless to continue arguing. He only said, "Okay, I have some files on my computer. I want to copy them. I'm sorry, the things on my computer are private files. You can't touch them." Then, he opened the door and said, "Have a safe journey." Xiao Daoan's face paled. The thing in the computer was very important. If he couldn't take it out, he would have to go back and trouble for a period of time. "Why are you so treacherous? What I'm selling is a house. What right do you have to detain my things?" Xiao Daoan was enraged and looked like he was about to charge forward. Xiao Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled, but her smile quickly disappeared. "Dad, why didn't you think carefully before selling it? My mom's portrait is also here. Doesn't it belong to someone else now?" Xiao Daoan's heart clenched, feeling a little embarrassed. She felt a little unfamiliar with her previous appearance. Xu Wencheng turned his head to look at Xiao Haiqing. He suddenly remembered the image that kept appearing in his mind. He was stunned for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Since you're going to be a public figure in the future, you can't have too much filth around you. Otherwise, this path will be very difficult. He's your biological father. You can't kill or touch him, but he'll always be a burden to you. Have you thought about this?" Looking at this photo, he should be able to guess that the girl in front of him had some father-daughter relationship with Xiao Daoan in the past. It was very difficult to settle things between blood relatives. Even if it was someone like Big Brother, didn't he also show mercy to that Shu Yu previously? Otherwise, with Shu Yu's character, he would have died long ago. Chapter 11:23. Xiao Haiqing didn't think that Xu Wencheng would suddenly ask about her private matters, and for a moment, she felt a little flattered. "I know he's my biggest obstacle, but he's also my biggest help," Xiao Haiqing said calmly. If her father hadn't been so ruthless back then, she wouldn't have been completely disappointed, and wouldn't have had the urge to succeed and become famous. She might even still be a chess piece for her father, and because of his and her stepmother's attitude, she would be sad and upset, quarreling with each other endlessly. Xu Wencheng's gaze deepened, and after a while, he said, "Since this house is now under my name, then to prevent people from coming to cause trouble after we leave, I'll have people specially come over to guard it." However, this house had a different meaning to Xiao Haiqing, and it wasn't suitable for outsiders to live in it, but it wasn't troublesome. The room next to it seemed pretty good, and he could temporarily buy it. In the future, if he wanted to come to this small county to relax, he wouldn't need to stay in Li Xiaoyun's hotel. Xu Wencheng happily decided in his heart. With the house in hand, Xiao Haiqing didn't have any worries at this time. However, once Xiao Haiqing returned to Ning City, she handed over the information she had gathered to her father's business rival. Even if the loss was calculated at a minimum, it would be more than 500,000 yuan. The Xiao family's company was indeed pitifully small, but after all, it had been glorious for a period of time, so it still had some foundation. She wouldn't let that hypocritical father of hers get the money for nothing. These preparations had been done long before Xiao Haiqing left Huaning County, so it didn't take her much effort at all. After she was done with the house, she searched the mountain with Jing Yunjiao as usual. 7 or 8 days passed, and just when Jing Yunjiao was starting to suspect that he had miscalculated the approximate location, a commotion suddenly came from among the hired workers. Found it, found it." One of them quickly ran in front of the 4 and pointed in a direction. When Jing Yunjiao and Xu Yuancheng heard this, their faces instantly changed. They immediately followed the person's footsteps. As they approached step by step, their hearts became heavier and heavier. When they reached the trees, they saw that there were close to 10 trees with the word Lan engraved on them. These trees had a history of at least 18 years. They were very thick and solid, but the engravings on them were very deep. Even now, they could still see it at a glance. "Dig." Jing Yunjiao stared at the ground surrounded by the trees and said. Even his breathing quickened a little. When everyone heard this, they didn't say a word and started working. The turf was lifted up bit by bit, revealing the dark brown soil inside. There was strength in numbers. Seeing that the hole was getting deeper and deeper, Jing Yunjiao ordered his men to slow down to avoid damaging the remains. Time passed by minute, second by second. Jing Yunjiao didn't dare to slack off. She looked around at the sparsely populated environment and thought about the woman who was related to her by blood. Her heart only felt a wave of sorrow. Found it. Suddenly, a voice came into his ears. Jing Yunjiao could only see a piece of mud-stained bone sticking out of the large pit in front of her. Beside her, Xu Yuancheng's body was trembling slightly. The two of them walked forward and carefully moved the surrounding soil, taking out the whole set of bones. The remains were a bit messy. It seemed that, as Shunxi had said, it had been dug up and buried again. Jing Yunjiao took a ring from the finger bone. The style was ordinary, but he could see the word Yi engraved inside the ring. It was stained with soil and was very clear. Chapter 11:24. Xu Wancheng's eyes were solemn and tears welled up in his eyes. He didn't say a word. Although the remains had something that belonged to Xu Xianlan, it had to be medically confirmed. At this time, the big guys didn't expect to dig out a human bone from the mountain. Their expressions were a little solemn. These people were very honest workers. Some of them had never seen a skeleton in their lives, so they couldn't help but feel a little shocked. Immediately, the remains were temporarily stored, and Xu Wancheng was responsible for asking a professional to verify it. However, within a few days, everything was settled. The bones were indeed Xu Xianlan's, and the faint hope of the past instantly disappeared. Following that, the two of them moved Xu Xianlan's corpse to the Li family's cemetery for the time being. However, the moment they entered the Li family's cemetery, Jing Yunjiao saw the name engraved on the tombstone that was as tall as a few people and was extremely shocked. When she first met Li Xiaoyun, she was worshipping her ancestors in Huaning County. Now that she saw it, the so-called worshipping ancestors was just a saying. The cemetery was very large. She buried her mother alone in a quiet place. During the few days that Jing Yunjiao stayed in Huaning County, Pak Yuan sped up the reorganization of the company. The mystery of the behind-the-scenes boss that had kept everyone in suspense for several months was personally solved by him. Bai Yuan was definitely a public businessman. The number of times he appeared in front of the media was relatively high, and he often made some inconceivable decisions. However, this Jade Spirit Wine Company was developing better and better. Ever since he personally said that the owner of Jade Spirit Wine Company was someone else, many people had been secretly investigating and observing. They even specially selected a few of the most suspicious people. Pak Yuan had been gritting his teeth and not saying anything about this before. Now that Jing Yunjiao had given the order, of course, he wouldn't continue to hide it. When Yuling Wines was established, Pak Yuan directly stated to the public that there had always been only one boss of Yuling Wines, and that was Jing Yunjiao. At the same time, Qin Shuai of Yunling Medicine reposted this comment and commented, "All the staff of Yunling Medicine greets President Jing. Old Qin, thank you for your nurturing. I will definitely do my best." As soon as this comment came out, the public was in an uproar. Jing Yunjiao? Who was that? Moreover, wasn't the Jade Spirit Wines announcing the boss behind the scenes? Why did Yunling Medical Company get involved in this? Therefore, everyone subconsciously linked the names of these two companies together. Thinking about it carefully, they were shocked. Cloud Spirit, Jade Spirit, the names seemed to be the same. Could it be that they were really created by the same person? As soon as this idea came out, almost everyone who knew about the two companies went crazy and began to ask the employees of the two companies. Unfortunately, other than a few high-ranking officials, no one else had ever heard of the name Jing Yunjiao. However, even though the name Jing Yunjiao was well known by everyone, up until now, almost everyone thought that this Jing Yunjiao was a woman in her 30s or 40s or even older. Pak Yuan was only responsible for notifying them. He was not responsible for revealing the true face of their big boss. Outsiders wouldn't think that Jing Yunjiao was just an 18-year-old girl, but that might not be the case in the Li family. Back then, the birthday party was so grand that everyone in the Li family must have known about her name. Now that they heard this news, It was impossible for them not to investigate her. Jing Yunjiao could only observe the changes and wait quietly. After returning from Huaning County, apart from her daily classes, she spent the rest of her time in Immortal Crane Hall. She believed that if her so-called biological grandfather found out about her relationship with Immortal Crane Hall, he would definitely not sit still. Chapter 1125. In the Celestial Crane Hall, Jing Yunjiao had a room reserved for her. If she stayed here too late, it would be convenient for her to stay the night as well. In the middle of the night, the medicine boy outside the door kept ringing the bell. Jing Yunjiao knew that there was an emergency. She quickly got up and went to the medicine hall. As soon as she entered the medicine hall, she saw a group of men and women supporting each other. One of the women of the same age who reeked of alcohol staggered forward. She pointed at Jing Yunjiao and said, "You're a doctor. Treat him. Hurry." Following the direction that the woman was pointing at, Jing Yunjiao saw a man in a strange condition. This man was convulsing all over and unconscious. The smell of alcohol on his body was even stronger than that of the woman. Jing Yunjiao immediately went forward to check his pulse. She realized that this person's breathing was shallow and slow. His pulse was weak but fast. His skin was cold and wet. If he was not treated, he would die from respiratory failure. Simply put, he drank too much and was poisoned by alcohol. Jing Yunjiao laid him on his side and cleaned his mouth. Then, she instructed the medicine boy to prepare medicine while she used silver needles to alleviate the situation. Although this illness was urgent, it was not difficult for her to deal with it. After the medicine was ready, she immediately let the man drink it. After a while, he regained some consciousness and began to vomit non-stop. The effect was much better than having his stomach pumped. The woman standing at the side dodged to the side with a look of disdain. Then, she glanced at Jing Yunjiao. He did not expect her to be so capable. "What's your name?" "Your medical skills are quite good," the woman said. Jing Yunjiao looked at the person in front of her with a smile that was not a smile. Her eyes narrowed. "Thank you for the compliment. Please go to the side and pay for the treatment and medicine." "You." A trace of displeasure appeared on the woman's face, but she quickly hid it and smiled. "I heard that a young female doctor came to the Celestial Crane Hall. Her medical skills are amazing. It seems that they are not lying. However, although you can treat this kind of small illness, don't be too proud. There are many doctors in this world. Someone like you who came from an unorthodox background cannot compare." Jing Yunjiao found it strange. Usually, even if it was an emergency, the medicine boy would rarely ask her to come out. After all, this kind of illness could be treated by other doctors or even apprentices. This woman must have asked the medicine boy to ask her to come out. Although she brought a patient over, her gaze and attitude did not seem like she was really here to see a doctor. It was more like she was here to see her. Not only that, this woman had an arrogant and noble temperament. She was probably not from an ordinary background. Jing Yunjiao glanced at her a few times and acted as if she didn't hear anything. She turned around and left, leaving the rest to the medicine boy. However, at this moment, the woman suddenly rushed up and said, "You're Jing Yunjiao, right? I am your cousin." "Cousin?" Jing Yunjiao lifted her eyes to look at her and instantly understood. Her grandfather, Li Wenbo, remarried after her grandmother, Jing Wenyu, died. They had 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. If they had to be counted by blood, they could be considered half her aunt and uncle. However, that uncle, Li Juanrue, died 18 years ago. It was said that he was killed by her eldest uncle. His father, Li Tianyi, had 2 half-sisters. The oldest was only 3 years younger than him and had long been married off. The other was slightly younger. She was probably only 27 or 28 years old and had yet to marry. In other words, the woman in front of her should be the only daughter of her eldest aunt. Jing Yunjiao could not help but want to laugh. She did not know if her grandfather really could not hold back and sent his granddaughter to inquire about the situation. Chapter 1126. Jing Yunjiao was well aware of this, but she didn't admit it. Instead, her eyes scanned the girl from head to toe before she laughed lightly. With a hint of disdain, she said, "Classmate, are you trying to climb up the social ladder? I'm sorry, but your appearance and temperament don't match our family. Don't even think about it." She despised that grandfather of hers and even felt a little disgusted with him. She didn't think it was shameful to take in a son-in-law. If the husband and wife got along well, they could still live happily. Moreover, she had asked many people. Her grandmother, Jing Wenyu, was an extremely reasonable person. She definitely wouldn't bully others. Moreover, the Li family had been one of the Li family's side branches for hundreds of years. In the past, they were considered the Jing family's trusted aides. However, Li Wenbo changed the name of the Jing family less than 3 years after his wife's death. He went against the original intention of marrying into the family, causing the Jing family to have no successor. He was really a heartless and unrighteous person. Now, Li Wenbo was using the Jing family's property to raise another woman, a child that had nothing to do with the Jing family. How shameless. It was impossible for Li Wenbo to have only recently found out about the news of her recognizing her relatives. Yet, he had only let the members of the Li family appear in front of her now. Wasn't it because she had asked Bai Yuan and Li Wenbo to announce her identity? He wasn't satisfied with taking over the Jing family's property. Now, he even had ideas about her. She really admired his character. When Jing Yunjiao said those words of disdain, Shi Jiao frowned. "You actually said that I'm not worthy of your family? Jing Yunjiao, if I remember correctly, you should be a wild girl who wandered outside for 18 years, right? Now that we've found you, consider yourself lucky. In 2 days, you'll be coming with me to see my grandfather. May I ask what your grandfather's surname is? And who is he to me?" Jing Yunjiao asked. "My grandfather, of course you're my grandfather. His surname is Li," Shi Jiao said with some disgust. In the past, she was the only junior in the family. Her parents doted on her and her aunt took care of her. Now, a cousin suddenly appeared. Moreover, she was the daughter of that crippled uncle. "Oh, his surname is Li? I thought your surname was Jing." Jing Yunjiao chuckled and said casually, "If your grandfather wants to see me or wants to be my grandfather, that's fine, but you have to ask him to change his surname first. Otherwise, there's no need to talk about it." After saying that, she glanced at her contemptuously and walked past her. When Shi Jiao saw how arrogant Jing Yunjiao was, she was really angry. She didn't want to come today, but a friend who was drinking with her happened to have some problems. She also remembered that her mother and aunt had been talking about Jing Yunjiao these days, so she thought of dropping by to meet him. If she was obedient and sensible, she would treat her as her cousin for the time being. After all, she was just a wild sparrow. No matter how much she taught her, she couldn't become a real phoenix. But she didn't expect her to be so insensible. Shi Jiao looked at Jing Yunjiao's back and a trace of darkness flashed through her eyes. She then looked at her companion who was still vomiting and felt a little disgusted. She threw over 1,000 yuan on the counter and turned to leave. The capital's Li family was a rich and powerful family. In the eyes of outsiders, they were extremely rich. In many people's hearts, the Li family had been practicing medicine for generations. This was because when the Li family rebuilt the hospital, they used the word inheritance to promote it. However, not many people knew that the Li family had inherited the Jing family's wealth. The Li family didn't know much about medicine. They only knew how to run a business. After all, Li Wenbo's previous generations were only shopkeepers who managed the Jing family's shops. Chapter 1127. After Shi Jiao angrily left the red-crowned crane hall, she immediately returned to the Li family. The Li family used to be near the Shu family, but now they had moved to another manor. The manor's environment was beautiful, and the buildings were filled with a modern atmosphere, luxurious and grand. There weren't many people in the Li family, so the head of the family was naturally Li Wenbo. He was already close to 70 years old, and his second wife after Jing Wenyu was called Lin Feng. She was also around 6 to 6 or 6 to 7 years old. However, their bodies were still relatively healthy, and they were full of energy when teaching the children. Li Wenbo had 2 sons and 2 daughters. The eldest son was Li Tianyi, born of Jing Wenyu. He should have inherited the Jing family's medical skills and taken the surname Jing. The youngest son, Li Juanrue, only lived to 17 years old. When Xu Xianlan disappeared, Xu Yuantarek angrily did something, causing Li Wenbo to be unable to have any descendants. Although Li Tianyi's legs were broken when he was brought back from Huaning County, they could have been cured. However, Li Tianyi stubbornly resisted, and with the pressure from the Xu family, Li Tianyi's legs were completely crippled. From then on, it was equivalent to having no lower body. Li Wenbo could no longer think of ways to make him remarry, have children, and inherit the family business. Of his 2 sons, one was dead and the other was injured. It could be said that this was the biggest blow Li Wenbo had suffered in his life, so he could only turn his attention to his daughters. The eldest daughter was called Li Shuyuan. Her husband was in politics, but his development was not as good as Xu Yuantarek's and was suppressed by him. The Li family was very strong, so she was a bit weak. The 2 of them only had 1 daughter, Shi Yijiao. His youngest daughter was called Li Shuqi. She had been very intelligent since she was young and had studied Western medicine. She was only 27 years old and had never married. Li Wenbo had long wanted her to find a son-in-law who would marry into the family. However, the word son-in-law was taboo in the Li family. Although Li Wenbo had done something wrong to the Jing family, he didn't want someone with a different surname to steal his property in the future. Thus, he had always been hesitant. After Shi Yijiao returned home, she saw the elders in the family happily chatting. She immediately sat down angrily with a bitter face. It was hard not to notice. "What's wrong? Who provoked our Jiao Jiao?" Old Madame Lin Feng asked with an amiable face. Although the old lady was not young, she looked very dignified. The round pearls on her neck were beautiful, and her gestures were very dignified. She looked very much like the ancient matriarchs depicted on TV. "Grandma, who else could it be? Isn't it the person you've been talking about every day recently?" Shi Yijiao pouted unhappily. When they heard this, they were confused. "Who are we talking about?" "It's that Jing Yunjiao, that cousin of mine?" Shi Yijiao asked directly. As soon as he said that, everyone's expressions changed. The old lady's smile faded a little. When Li Shuyuan saw that her daughter's words had made her mother unhappy, she immediately chimed in. "This child, why did you suddenly mention a wild girl? He's just an ugly guy who can't be seen on the streets. He's not important at all." Li Shuqi sat by the side and didn't say anything, but there was a hint of displeasure in her eyes. Everything in this family was destined to be inherited by her. Anyone who could stop her should not exist, especially those with the surname Jing. "Mom, that's where you're wrong." Shi Yijiao sat up straight and looked at everyone. Her eyes sparkled as she continued, "Today, I went to the Immortal Crane Hall and saw Jing Yunjiao. Chapter 1128. Today, my friend drank too much, so I wanted to take him to the Red-Crowned Crane Hall to take a look. Who knew that after I got there, I would discover that this Jing Yunjiao is extremely arrogant. But she's quite pretty. Oh right, her temperament is similar to that trash of an uncle. They're both ice cold. Also, she does have medical skills. My friend was in a critical condition, but in the end, she cured him in just a few moments. How miraculous. After Shi Yijiao praised her, her tone suddenly changed. But she's especially annoying. I went up and said that I was her cousin, but she actually asked for my grandfather's surname. She even said that if I want to claim kinship, then my grandfather's surname should be Jing. Grandma, what do you think she means? Is she crazy? Shi Yijiao was only 18 years old this year, so she wasn't very clear about her past. She only knew that when she was born, she was the only little miss in the family. Her grandparents doted on her, and her parents let her have her way. Her mother also said that if she was outstanding enough, then she might be able to obtain a large portion of the family's assets. As for that Jing Yunjiao, she really didn't understand. She was clearly her grandfather's granddaughter, so why was her surname Jing and not Li? If Jing Yunjiao's father was really Li Tianyi's trash of an uncle, then Jing Yunjiao's identity would be much more legitimate than hers. She would also have the qualifications to compete with her for the inheritance. Yet, Jing Yunjiao actually made her grandfather change his surname. Her grandfather's previous wife's surname was indeed Jing, but how could a husband follow his wife's surname? She was simply crazy. Shi Yijiao's words caused the old lady and the others' expressions to change. The things that Shi Yijiao didn't understand, they, the elders, knew. Mom, this Jing Yunjiao probably didn't come with good intentions. Do we still want to acknowledge her? Li Shuyuan hurriedly said. Just because she didn't come with good intentions, that's all the more reason to acknowledge her. The old lady's wrinkled face revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Do you know the background of that Yunling medicine? It even involved the military. Your father sent people to investigate. One of the factories specializes in producing medicine for the military. It's very confidential. If it wasn't an extremely effective prescription, then they definitely wouldn't have put in so much effort. Right now, the prescription should be in Jing Yunjiao's hands. The Shu family has already snatched it, but we can't let them completely take over what should belong to us. The successors of the Jing clan were all extremely skilled in medicine, but it was a pity that Jing Wenyu had died too early. The prescriptions and medical books she left behind were nothing special. Almost all of the Jing clan's apprentices could learn them, but the true essence was hidden somewhere by that woman. If they had obtained the Jing family's ancestral secret technique back then, no one would have been able to shake their Li family. Now, Jing Yunjiao had suddenly appeared. If she was just an ordinary girl, it would have been fine. However, her medical skills seemed to be extraordinarily high. She was even able to establish a pharmaceutical and wine company at such a young age. From this, it seemed that Jing Wenyu had used some special method to pass down the knowledge. He had to find a way to get it back. The old lady's words were righteous, as if this thing's surname was Li. If Jing Yunjiao was present, he would have snorted in disdain. There were not many people in the world who could be so thick-skinned. It was truly rare to see someone take someone else's things for granted. But she's definitely prejudiced against us now. How can we make her let down her guard? Li Shuyuan said. The old lady thought for a moment. There's no need to rush. She's just an 18-year-old child. Her life was ordinary in the past. Other than her medical skills, she probably doesn't have any other skills. Otherwise, why would the company be handed over to someone else? Chapter 1129. Halfway through her words, the old lady thought for a while before continuing. Qi, go back and talk to your father. Tell him what Jiao Jiao heard. Otherwise, when Jing Yunjiao comes back, he'll really treat her like a treasure. The Li family didn't even have an heir, so they could only choose from their daughters. However, Li Wenbo was a suspicious person. After all, he had wronged his wife and robbed other people's family wealth, so he had some scruples when it came to choosing a son-in-law. Now, she wanted to let her husband know that this granddaughter who came back from the outside was disloyal and was worse than a son-in-law. I know, Mom. Li Shuqi sat on the side and answered very cooperatively. Li Shuyuan glanced at her younger sister and felt a trace of jealousy, but there was nothing she could do. After all, she was old and already married. Moreover, her daughter didn't take her surname. If her surname was Li, at least she would have a better chance of winning. Right, about Big Brother, should we tell him? Li Shuqi asked again. The big brother she was talking about was Li Tianyi. However, when the old lady heard him, her face immediately turned cold. What big brother? He's a lunatic. How can we not tell him about such a big thing? All these years, he kept his mouth shut because he was afraid that we would go to that small place and bring his daughter back. If it weren't for him, the Shu family wouldn't have gotten ahead of us. The Shu family had a grudge against her for killing her son. That year, when Shu Xianlan kidnapped Li Tianyi, what did it have to do with her son? Shu Xianlan's disappearance wasn't caused by her son, but Shu Yuantarek actually killed her son. If he wanted revenge, he should have killed Li Tianyi. Why did he target her son? If it weren't for him, the Li family wouldn't have fallen to the point where there was no one to inherit it. Thinking of her son, the old lady trembled with anger. Her two daughters saw this and hurriedly went to comfort her. However, Jing Yunjiao didn't know anything about this at the moment. In the middle of the night, she stepped into the ancestral hall in the backyard. On top of it was the ranking of the ancestors of the Jing family. Thinking back to the first time she came here, the rankings were all covered up and she didn't see them. But now, she personally wiped the rankings one by one. As expected, the name placed at the top was the name of the Jing clan's ancestor, Jing He. She had seen that sage-like old man. Even if it was just a shadow in the space, it was still unforgettable. It was all thanks to him that she was where she was today. Looking down, the names were unfamiliar, but the surnames gave him a sense of familiarity. She felt that everything in this world seemed to be predestined. Although she had wandered outside, she had relied on an old piece of jade to carry the surname of Jing. Chapter 1130. Thinking back to when Jing Yunjiao first appeared, she had a feeling that Jing Yunjiao's temperament towards medicine was the same as the Jing family's, with an innate arrogance. It was a pity that she didn't know Jing Yunjiao's identity back then. A few days ago, Jing Yunjiao returned to the Shu family. She also knew about this. She had long wanted to ask if her biological father was Li Tianyi, and whether she had the Jing family's bloodline in her, but she didn't dare to ask. Until just now, when the Li family's people came knocking on her door, she knew that there was no mistake. Thank you, Dr. Yu, for guarding Immortal Crane Hall all these years. Jing Yunjiao said sincerely. If Immortal Crane Hall didn't have Yu Fu, it would have been destroyed long ago. If it fell into the hands of an unreliable person, it was possible that this house would be sold to the Li family. At that time, there would be nothing left. Although the Jing family's disciples were many, they were scattered everywhere. Now, it was like a plate of loose sand, and it was impossible for them to make a comeback. When Miss was about to give birth, she was afraid that there would be an accident, so she specially instructed me to let your father study medicine well no matter what, so that he could inherit everything from the Jing family in the future. But she didn't expect. Since you are Miss Wanyue's granddaughter, I will help you no matter what, but I hope you can promise me one thing. Yu Fu said with a serious face. Although there was no such thing as master and servant in this era, it was different decades ago. It was all thanks to the Jing family that she could live until now. Jing Wenyu was her master. Now that Jing Wenyu was no longer around, even if times had changed, she still had to protect the Jing family's child. Please say. Jing Yunjiao replied. Since the Li family's people came to find you, I'm afraid they will continue to disturb you in the future. That Li Wenbo is a despicable person. He will definitely not allow his children to have the surname Jing. When the time comes, he will definitely want you to change your name, but I hope you can promise not to compromise no matter what. No matter what methods they use, even if they use your biological father as a threat, they will not allow you to change your surname. Can you promise me? Yu Fu said very seriously. Jing Yunjiao wasn't surprised and nodded straightforwardly. You can rest assured on this point. Back then, she had also promised the elder ancestor that she would study medicine well and carry it forward. Naturally, she could not go back on her promise. Hearing this, Yu Fu's expression eased a lot, but he sighed again. What a pity. It's said that the Jing family has a medical book that records some secret techniques or treatment methods for incurable diseases. It's very important, but your grandmother didn't have the time to pass this thing down to the next generation. That thing has always been tightly guarded. Other than the heir of the Jing family, no one else can find it. In the past, I was glad that Miss didn't leave behind any clues for Li Wenbo to succeed. But now, I'm a little sad. After all, you can't learn it now. Yu Fu said. When Jing Yunjiao heard what she said, she didn't take it to heart. The spirit jade left behind by the old ancestor was the real treasure. Now that she had absorbed almost all of it, she was afraid that even the medical book passed down by the Jing clan would not be as complete as the spirit jade. Just like the acupuncture techniques she was using now, Many of them were secrets that were not passed down. Dr. Yu, don't worry. The master who taught me medicine back then had extremely high medical skills. I remember he said that his medical skills came from the same source as the Jing family. He also said that my surname was Jing and that it was fate, so he taught me everything. I think I have already learned the things that the Jing family lost by chance. It can be considered a blessing in disguise. Jing Yunjiao lied and comforted him. Chapter 1131. Hearing Jing Yunjiao's words, Yu Fu's face was filled with astonishment and surprise. If that's the case, then that's really great. Yu Fu was extremely excited. No wonder Jing Yunjiao's medical skills were so superb. Ever since she came to Immortal Crane Hall, there was almost no illness that she couldn't cure. She was simply a miracle. He originally thought that she had great talent, but he didn't expect that it was not only so, it was predestined. The two talked through the night, and this old Dr. Yu Fu's emotions could not be calmed down for a long time. But after the stone in his heart was lifted, Dr. Yu looked much more amiable than before. Early in the morning, he called everyone to the back hall. There were more and more patients in Immortal Crane Hall, so there were many more doctors in the hall. But they were all people who knew each other well. Now that everyone was gathered together, they looked at each other, not knowing what Yu Fu wanted to announce. After all the doctors, apprentices and even medicine apprentices had gathered, Yu Fu dragged Jing Yunjiao to the front and said, "Today I have something to tell everyone, and it's a good thing. Back then, Miss Wenyu passed away suddenly, and her child was taken care of by Li Wenbo, causing Immortal Crane Hall to be without a successor. Even though I've temporarily managed Immortal Crane Hall these past few years, I've always been brooding over it. However, from now on, Immortal Crane Hall has a true owner, and she is Jing Yunjiao. We have all received the grace of the Jing clan and learned the Jing clan's medical skills. The first rule of Immortal Crane Hall is to never deceive or destroy the ancestors. Jing Yunjiao is Miss Wenyu's only granddaughter. Her medical skills are exceptional, this you have all witnessed. No matter if it is bloodline, character, or medical skills, she is fully deserving. So from today onwards, the master of Immortal Crane Hall is Jing Yunjiao. Since everyone is a disciple of the Jing clan, you should respect your master. Immortal Crane Hall was not considered a sect, but it had its own rules. These ancient masters had always been a teacher for a day, a father for life. These people's medical skills were all learned from the Jing clan. Now that Jing Yunjiao had returned, it was natural for them to be respectful and courteous to her. They even bluntly said that if anyone in this group of doctors wanted to harm her, as long as the news spread out, that person would never have a foothold. Because Jing Yunjiao was now representing the Jing clan, she was no longer just a simple individual, but the leader of the group. When the group of old doctors heard this, they were instantly shocked. However, he did not suspect anything. They had seen Jing Yunjiao's performance these days and admired him in their hearts. Now that the Jing clan had a successor, and it was a genius like her, it was definitely a joyous occasion. Chapter 1132. Jing Yunjiao nodded as if she had understood something. Many of these people had already established their own families. It had already been so many years, wanting them to risk their lives for the Jing family might not be possible anymore. However, if she wanted them to help, it was definitely possible. They were all connections. Li Wenbo had taken the Jing family's wealth, but he would never be able to take away the Jing family's power. Jing Yunjiao instantly received everyone's respect in the Crane Hall, and the Li family appeared in front of her again in less than 2 days. However, this time, it was her biological grandfather who had arrived. He had directly come to the school and even sat in the dean's reception room, openly waiting for her. Every time after school, Jing Yunjiao would follow Professor Mo for another 1 to 2 hours of Chinese martial arts class. Thus, she had completely ignored her biological grandfather and didn't go meet him. The strokes used by the Wang family's works are more free and unrestrained. If you want to learn the essence of his semi-cursive style, you have to study the person's character and life. As the saying goes, the words reflect the person. Mo Zhengyang was seriously pointing at the calligraphy she had just copied when the door to the classroom was pushed open. An old man walked in, and beside him was Shi Yijiao. "Hey, Jing Yunjiao, my grandfather is here to see you," Shi Yijiao shouted at Jing Yunjiao. Mo Zhengyan's voice was interrupted, and his face turned cold. He was a little unhappy, and turned to glare. However, when he saw who it was, his expression turned from displeasure to anger. "Li Wenbo, you still have the face to appear in front of me." Li Wenbo was also a little surprised, and a trace of disgust flashed across his eyes. Meanwhile, it was Jing Yunjiao's first time seeing the grandfather she had heard of countless times. He was already old, but his body was still strong. He was on the thin side, and although he was around 70 years old, he was still very energetic. He wore a suit and a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Although there was not much hair on his forehead, he looked very dignified. While Jing Yunjiao was sizing up her grandfather, Li Wenbo was also looking at her. He was serious, mechanical, and emotionless, as if he was looking at an object. This kind of feeling was not pleasant at all. "Mo Zhengyang, are you her teacher?" Li Wenbo asked without holding back. The old man's voice was a little low, and his face was dark. Mo Zhengyang had always had a bad temper. Now that the person he hated the most was standing in front of him and speaking to him with such an attitude, he felt disgusted. With a stiff face, he said, "It's been so many years, but you still stink." The thing he regretted the most in his life was giving up his beloved woman to this despicable person for the so-called dignity of a man. If he did not see Li Wenbo die in front of him, he would not be at ease. "I don't have time to argue with you. I'm here to look for my granddaughter," Li Wenbo said directly. When Mo Zhengyang heard this, he turned to look at Jing Yunjiao and frowned. "His talking about you?" He was in disbelief. How could Li's granddaughter have the surname? "May I ask who you are?" Jing Yunjiao pretended to be confused and asked. Li Wenbo lifted his leg and walked over. At this time, Jing Yunjiao noticed that there were actually other people following outside the door. Looking again, she saw a woman pushing a wheelchair in, and on the wheelchair was a man. This person. Jing Yunjiao immediately recognized him, even though she had never seen him before. Li Tianyi, her biological father, the person who denied her existence out of helplessness. If he hadn't taken the initiative to become the son-in-law of the Jing family, his first wife would have been Lin Feng. Li Wenbo was a typical person who ate from the bowl and looked at the pot. Jing Yunjiao's words exposed Li Wenbo's past. His entire face turned ugly. Shi Yijiao, who was standing beside him, didn't quite understand. Was this Jing Yunjiao crazy? What did she mean by saying that his wife had died 3 years ago and he was secretly having another wife? Was she implying that her grandmother was a mistress? That wasn't the case. It was said that Jing Yunjiao used his wealth and power to force her grandfather to marry her. Who knew that she had a bad life and died after giving birth to a son? Who could she blame? Chapter 1134. Shi Yijiao was furious. She pointed at Jing Yunjiao and said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? I think the Shu family has brainwashed you, right? You're my grandfather's granddaughter, but you're siding with an outsider. You're really a wild child with no manners." Slap. Jing Yunjiao gave him a tight slap. Shi Yijiao was shocked by the pain on her face. She looked up at Jing Yunjiao and said angrily, "You dare to hit me?" After she finished speaking, she rushed forward like a madwoman, wanting to scratch Jing Yunjiao. How could Jing Yunjiao let her do as she pleased? She immediately grabbed her hair and threw the bitch out of the door. Her actions were ruthless, not leaving any leeway. Shi Yijiao was a little dazed from the beating. She was already 18 years old a few years ago. Since young, she had never suffered the slightest bit. Everyone in the family doted on her like a treasure. Who would dare to lay a finger on her? Jing Yunjiao, this cousin of hers who popped out of nowhere, didn't even say a few words and actually beat her up. How could she swallow this anger? Jing Yunjiao wouldn't show any mercy to Lin Feng's daughter and granddaughter. Li Wenbo and Li Shuyuan were furious when she hit them. Enough! Li Wenbo yelled, "Why are you hitting and scolding a girl? What happened back then can't be explained in a short time. If you're not convinced, Grandpa will explain it to you. Why are you yelling at your cousin? Our family owes you all these years for letting you wander outside for so long. Grandpa will make it up to you if you want anything in the future. But you can't mess around like this. You should learn from the daughters of other families in the future." Li Wenbo glanced at Mo Zhengyang and said, "Our Li family's granddaughter has a famous teacher to guide her. Professor Mo, you don't have to interfere in the future." "Yun Zhao, what's going on? You're Wanyue's granddaughter?" Mo Zhengyang ignored Li Wenbo's words and asked Jing Yunjiao. Jing Yunjiao nodded. "That's right." As soon as she admitted it, Mo Zhengyan's expression changed. All these years, he had always felt that he had let Jing Wenyu down. Every time he thought of her son becoming a cripple and having no descendants, his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. But now, Jing Yunjiao, the student he was most proud of, was actually Wanyue's descendant. How could he not be excited? However, Li Wenbo hated Mo Zhengyan's look the most. It was as if he was reminding him that the reason Jing Wenyu had married him back then was because Mo Zhengyang had never compromised. Mo Zhengyang did not want to be the son-in-law, but he did. It was as if he, Li Wenbo, was born to be inferior to others. "Li Wenbo, didn't you hear what Yun Zhao said? She was Wenyu's granddaughter. What does it have to do with your Li family? Who the hell are you, Li Wenbo?" If you had fulfilled the agreement back then and allowed your son's surname to be Jing, I, Mo Zhengyang, would have been ashamed of my inferiority and would not have said anything in front of you. However, you are an ungrateful villain who changes his mind. How could someone like you deserve to be a grandfather? Bah! At this moment, Mo Zhengyang felt both physically and mentally comfortable. Li Wenbo had been thinking about the descendants of the Jing family all day, but in the end, he still could not prevent it. "Yun Zhao, don't you want to go home with Grandpa? As long as you go back, you can often see your father in the future. His health is not very good now. Are you sure you want to be an unfilial daughter?" Li Wenbo's face was ashen, but he still said patiently. Li Tianyi's gaze was cold, but Jing Yunjiao seemed to understand the deep meaning in his eyes. Chapter 1135. Li Wenbo was using her father to threaten her. She was a medical student and could tell that her father's appearance was the result of not being exposed to light for many years. Not only that, but because he rarely exercised, his body was very stiff and his muscles were somewhat atrophied. His face was pale and he looked lifeless. The Li family was also a wealthy family. Logically speaking, her father shouldn't look like this no matter what. It could be seen that Li Wenbo might not even care about his own son. Thinking about it, her father was now in his 40s and looked like an old man in his 50s or 60s. His lower body couldn't move at all. Moreover, he couldn't bear children for the Li family for nearly 20 years. Not only that, Li Wenbo had to guard against him to prevent him from siding with the Jing family. It would be strange if he treated him well. Moreover, Li Wenbo's second wife hadn't passed away yet. Facing her husband's child with another woman, it was even more impossible for her to treat him well. Moreover, Lin Feng's son had died indirectly because of her father. It was already a miracle that her father hadn't starved to death over these years. However, her father's eyes were cold. He definitely didn't want her to go to the Li family. "My family's surname is Jing and Shu, but not Li," Jing Yunjiao said resolutely. Li Wenbo was dissatisfied, but he looked like a magnanimous grandfather. "I can understand that you can't think straight now. I'll give you time to think about it." After saying that, he left in a mighty manner. Before leaving, Li Tianyi turned to look at her again, relief flashing through his eyes. All these years, he wanted to find his daughter more than anyone else. He was even afraid that he wouldn't be able to see her again in his lifetime. However, no matter how much he wanted to, he didn't dare to open his mouth. His father was a man who only cared about himself. Back then, in order to bring him back from Hua Ning County, he didn't hesitate to let someone break his leg. If he knew about his daughter's existence, he would definitely find her at all costs. When he raised her in the Li family, what would she be like? She would either be timid and weak, or be beaten to death by her stepmother. Everyone in the Li family was an outsider to his daughter. Why would she come back? As for the Shu family, although he believed that they would treat his daughter well, he didn't dare to bet on who would find her first. Fortunately, the heavens favored Yun Zhao. Her surname was Jing, and her name was Yun Zhao. Although he didn't come up with this name, it was to his liking. Finally, there would be a day when the clouds would open and the world would be clear. At this time, Jing Yunjiao was thinking of a way to bring his biological father out of the Li family. This person was not difficult to save. After all, he was an adult man. As long as he was willing, he could do it openly. However, how could all these years of hard work be in vain? Jing Yunjiao's eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. After staying with Professor Mo until the end of the class, she returned to her dormitory. However, not long after she arrived at the dormitory, someone downstairs called her name. Jing Yunjiao, someone is looking for you at the pavilion. It's a student from another school, the person downstairs said. Jing Yunjiao froze for a moment. Could it be Xiao Haiqing and the others? However, after thinking about it carefully, it was impossible. She, Xiao Haiqing, and Su Chu all used their cell phones to communicate. There was no need for someone else to pass a message. Moreover, she didn't even know the person who passed the message. Jing Yunjiao thought it was useless. She simply went downstairs and walked to the pavilion. At this time, the campus was very lively. There were people everywhere, and the pavilion was even more so. When Jing Yunjiao arrived, she looked around for a long time but didn't see anyone familiar. She thought it was a prank by the student from earlier. However, just as she turned around and was about to leave, a boy walked out from a corner and called out, "Sister." Chapter 1136. Under the dim streetlights, the person's face couldn't be seen clearly, but Jing Yunjiao recognized him the moment he turned around. Qiao Zizhou. This person that she had almost forgotten. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but smile. She let Pak Yuan and Qin Shui announce their identities to attract the Li family's attention, but she didn't expect that someone she hadn't seen for a long time would suddenly appear. Qiao Zizhou's studies were good, and as far as she knew, he was now studying at another university that was almost side by side with a university. Qiao Hongye's disappearance back then didn't affect him much, and he didn't even care about it. "So it's you," Jing Yunjiao said expressionlessly. Qiao Zizhou took a closer look at Jing Yunjiao, and was somewhat stunned. He remembered that this sister of his wasn't like this in the past. Her face was covered in dirt, yellow and emaciated, and she looked listless. She was also quite weak, and her reputation wasn't good either. In short, she made him feel embarrassed, but he didn't know when it started, but the one who was embarrassed suddenly became his own sister, Qiao Hongye. And Jing Yunjiao's results were getting better and better. Not only did she leave the Qiao family, she even became the top scorer in the province. However, he didn't care about this at first. So what if she became more outstanding? She was still a girl. In the future, she would still have to find a boyfriend, get married, and then stay at home to take care of her husband and children. Those superior abilities would be completely wasted. Moreover, other than her good results, she didn't have any other good points. She wasn't worthy of his attention, as long as this person didn't make trouble for him and embarrass him. It was just that he recently heard some unbelievable news. Someone said that the boss behind Yunling Medicine and Yuling Wines was called Jing Yunjiao. Jing Yunjiao wasn't a common name, and Pak Yuan of Yuling Wines used to live near their house, so he thought about it and felt that the Jing Yunjiao that Pak Yuan was talking about was the same person as the sister in front of him. He never thought that there would be a day where he would be surprised and shocked by Jing Yunjiao. After all, she used to be so. "Sis, are you doing well?" Qiao Zizhou tried to make his voice as polite and gentle as possible. He also carefully recalled that he didn't seem to have done anything bad to Jing Yunjiao in the past. Even if Jing Yunjiao and the Qiao family had severed ties, he should still recognize him as his younger brother. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but want to laugh. After her rebirth, she had almost never interacted with Qiao Zizhou. It could be said that the two of them could be considered strangers. Back then, when she took revenge on Qiao Hongye and Qiao Weiman, the only reason she let him off was because he was obedient enough and didn't find trouble with her. She didn't expect that this person still couldn't hold back and ran to her face to ask if she was doing well. "What's the matter?" Jing Yunjiao had a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were filled with scrutiny. She wasn't in a hurry to throw him out, as if she was waiting for him to continue. This attitude made Qiao Zizhou's face burn. "It's nothing much, I'm your younger brother, so I came to see you," Qiao Zizhou said absent-mindedly, and then in a blink of an eye, he said, "Just now, I was at the school gate asking if anyone knew you. In the end, when they heard your name, they brought me in and helped me invite you over." Really, what a coincidence. He felt strange in his heart because when he mentioned the 3 words Jing Yunjiao, that classmate directly asked who he was, so he told the truth that he was Jing Yunjiao's younger brother. However, the other party's face was filled with shock, and the way he looked at him suddenly became extremely strange. Chapter 1137. He tried to ask around and found out that Jing Yunjiao seemed to have found her family, but he didn't ask in detail. After all, Jing Yunjiao was lost in Huaning County. Her parents probably weren't that rich. If Jing Yunjiao was lucky, she should be from a well-off family. Qiao Zizhou thought a lot in his heart. Jing Yunjiao only smiled. She looked kind, but she knew what was going on. Qiao Zizhou's temper was the same as Qiao Weiman's. He was cold-hearted and extremely selfish. His personality was also more male-chauvinistic. When he was in the Qiao family, he looked down on even his own sister, Qiao Hongye. He felt that girls were useless in their studies and should stay at home to take care of the family, do the laundry and cook. So when he ordered her around, Qiao Zizhou didn't feel the slightest bit of psychological pressure. This person didn't seem like a young man at all. His thoughts were more like an uncivilized old man. However, Qiao Zizhou's looks weren't bad. His handsomeness was impressive. He and Qiao Hongye were twins, so the two of them looked a little alike. Looking at his face, no matter what, Jing Yunjiao didn't have any good feelings towards him. "Oh right, sister, how are your results now? Do you still have a scholarship?" Qiao Zizhou saw that Jing Yunjiao didn't seem to want to talk to him, so he started to take the initiative to find a topic. Jing Yunjiao nodded casually. If it was someone else, she might have just turned around and left. But Qiao Zizhou, she wanted to know what he was up to. "Sister, your luck is much better than mine. I've been especially unlucky recently. This semester's scholarship was cancelled," Qiao Zizhou said without a clue. He continued, "My dad, I don't know if you've seen his current appearance. I'm really disappointed in him. Our family's conditions were not bad at first, but he invested recklessly. Now we're so poor that we don't even have enough to eat. I've been working a few jobs recently for my living expenses." Qiao Zizhou's heart carried a trace of hope. His words were so straightforward. Jing Yunjiao should be able to understand, right? She already has a scholarship. Why does she still need your company? A girl, isn't it a waste? When she gets married, it'll all be given to her in-laws. What a loss. Jing Yunjiao wanted to laugh in his heart, but he had to play dumb. It's only right to work harder. After all, he's your father. Sister, actually, I don't have to work so hard. Qiao Zizhou whispered. Yeah, if you were studying at a university and were in the same department as me, I might have given you the scholarship. What a pity. Jing Yunjiao continued to play dumb. If others heard this, they would probably faint from laughter. Jing Yunjiao had made up her mind to play dumb until the very end. She looked like she was in a daze, causing Qiao Zizhou to stifle a mouthful of anger in his heart. It was neither up nor down, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. However, he boasted that he was a man, so he felt a little embarrassed to say it out loud. Thus, his face alternated between white and red. I don't want that scholarship. Sis, I want to borrow more money from you. It's like this, my dad doesn't give me money anymore, and I don't have enough money from working, so I was wondering if you could help me first. Also, I recently got a girlfriend, and her family background is pretty good. In front of her, I seem a little too tasteless, so I want to improve my life. Sis, I only have you as a reliable relative now, so this time you have to help me. Xiao Zizhou's heart was beating like a drum, and he had been mulling over it for a long time before he finally said it. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.